Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is Ghazala Amin with another presentation. We talked about project management and planning process. Second phase of the 5 processes that are out there: the initiation, the planning, and then we will move on to the execution, monitoring and control, and then ultimately the closure phase. During the presentations, we will continue to talk about each phase, but focusing more on the knowledge areas that are out there, and we'll focus on the PMI knowledge areas. Currently there are 9 of those, but in the 5th edition of PMBOK that is already in the process, it's already coming out, they have added another one, and I talked about that slightly in the last lecture also, that they're adding a very important aspect of knowledge area, which is the stakeholder management, including the customer relationship management, of how to identify, how to monitor, and how to keep your stakeholders at an appropriate distance so that their contribution is maximum towards the success of your project. Within the planning phase, we talked about how important it is a project manager's 60% time during the project life cycle is spent during the planning phase, and we continued on to talk about different methodologies. However, one thing that I'll reiterate that needs to be clear in everyone's head is that no matter who uses what terminology, the process of planning stays the same. You have to estimate, you have to baseline, you have to compare planned versus the actual tracking. All that is called the earned value. Within the planning phase, you also create something called a project plan. Project management plan is not a document. It comprises of several documents, templates, recordings, historical information about similar projects. It's time for us to review lessons learned from other projects that we as project managers have done, or our organization, or others who have taken up similar projects. So, combination of it all, project plan is a complete set of documents used by the project manager to take the project from point A to point Z. Moving on, we also talked about some of the issues within the project planning phase. There are issues within the planning phase that causes a project to become troubled. There's no failed project from the beginning, but you start seeing signs of trouble. And there was a list that was shared with you, a list of issues that we as project manager and we as project team starts to recognize during the planning phase that can cause a project to become either more troubled or failed towards the execution or the monitoring and control phase. Good and experienced project managers use this time to appropriately identify some of these issues and come up with mitigation process to either minimize those issues or take care and eliminate them appropriately. This lecture is dedicated to seeing those signs, identifying, and then coming up with some mitigation plan of how to minimize or eliminate those issues. Let's start off. Within this lecture, we'll be talking about troubled projects. 2 references that I would like you guys to go out and print and review for your own good. The first one is also something that I will discuss with you and will share with you in a PDF format. The reference is from the ESI International Incorporate 2006, and obviously it's strictly used for educational purposes at CIIT Pakistan. Another one is the prevention measures to avoid troubled projects. Some of the content will be shared with you to understand the issues and understand what is causing some of those issues to surface, and then also how to eliminate or minimize them. Reference is the IBM Quality Assurance document. Again, it is strictly being used for educational purposes at CIIT Pakistan. So, troubled projects. Before the countless money-wasting, reputation-busting projects of the world were failed projects. They were troubled projects. So before they became failed, they were troubled projects. Trouble means that the project's variance. Okay, let's focus on the word variance. Variance will be what has been planned, baselined, versus the actual happenings. So when the project's variance, comparison of what was planned versus what is actually happening right now, within time, cost or scope, the triple constraints of the project. When you start seeing either exceeding or not exceeding the acceptable levels, you will know as project manager and project team that some kind of intervention will be required, either from the sponsors, from the project organization, or increased energy level from within the project organization and your project team itself. If you do not take those measures, and if the project manager is incapable of identifying those issues, then there is a kind of a guarantee that your project is going to follow the path of failure. Why do we worry about troubled projects? Project failure can occur for an infinite number of reasons. Sometimes it is out of your control. Maybe unexpected and unplanned for requirement changes causes your team to miss a series of deadlines. Now again, unexpected. Security issues, technological issues, human resource issues. There are multiple reasons which can cause these issues to surface, and those will be considered unexpected and unplanned for requirement. These issues will changes to the initial requirement, and obviously your team will start missing deadlines, the milestones that we talked about. Maybe you lost a key member of your project team, a person with the technical know-how or the expertise that your project team cannot actually proceed on its regular path in the regular scheduled time because of the absence of this particular team member. Maybe you were given unrealistic deadlines, and within the planning phase, you as a project member on the project team or the project manager could not identify that those timelines or milestones were unrealistic. Maybe you, and now who is this you? The you is the project manager or any of the important team members. You underestimated that how long of a time will this project take. Again, the unrealistic timeline from the customer to the unrealistic or unidentified or underestimated time or unrealistic time. All these are contributing to projects that could be, or one of the multiple reasons why a project could be a troubled project. Another one, maybe you underestimated the time that a project would take. Summing up of project tasks. If individual tasks were underestimated because of either lack of expertise or another one, remember the bell curve that we gave? During the planning phase, you have minimal resources. So somebody else, either it's a subject matter expert or a consultant or a senior technical person, is estimating the time to do your task or to achieve your task for the team members that are not part of the team right now. So when others make estimates on your behalf, there is a probability and a possibility that they will actually give less estimate than what may be required in reality. Could or could not, may or may not. Again, these are situations and issues that cause a project to have unrealistic deadlines. Another important one, maybe you as a project manager did not take steps to ensure quality. Within the 5 phases of the project, everybody, including your sponsors, are in a hurry to move your project from planning phase to the execution phase. Educated and learned project management professionals understand the need and importance of spending the right amount of time during the planning phase. When we don't get to spend the right amount of time, then what happens? Things start breaking apart. But during the planning phase, nobody understands the importance of it, and especially this nobody group are your project sponsors and your customers. They want to see bodies coming in, they want to see bodies moving, they want to see equipment and technology out and about, people bustling, hustling with project activities. In this hurry, from planning to execution, and then execution to actually the closure phase, there's always a hurry of moving from one phase to another. And what happens in this hustle and bustle? One aspect that is ignored is making sure that the quality or the preventive measures don't have enough time or don't get enough attention to proceed on its normal path. Let's look at some of the highlighted stuff at the bottom of the slide. Projects don't go from on track to failed overnight. They first become troubled. The troubled period, however distressing, is an opportunity, often the absolute last opportunity, to turn things around and make the project a success. So, for a project manager and the project organization and the project team, when you start seeing signs of troubled project, the flags need to go up, issues need to be identified, risks should be becoming issues, they should go into the issues management document, and you start sharing those signs with the customer and the consultants and your project organizations and the sponsors, and you start taking remedial processes in effect. So why do we worry about troubled projects? So many issues of trouble to failure. Let's talk about why project failure or why troubled projects are such big issues. Let's look at some real life examples. A Standish Chaos Chronicles, a journal, report states that only 52% of completed projects meet their proposed functionality. Only 52%. In a world which is ultimately trying to become projectized because of depleting resources, only half of those projects are going to become successful, trying to meet their objectives, include the proposed functionality. The same study, based on more than 13,000 United States projects, reports that successful projects make up just over a third or 34% of all projects, meaning that the other 2/3 are failing. So only 52% are meeting their proposed functionality, and only 34% are considered successful, meaning that they got done on time, they met their schedule, and they also met the main objectives of what the customer wanted to achieve in the first place. Another report on 9,236 IT, information technology projects, showed that project success rates have settled at a startling 28%. And this is the Standish Group 2003 study. Imagine where the world has come to now. We have improved from education perspective within project management, but the issues of seeing troubled projects, of observing failed projects, have continued to exist at the same rate. In 2002, Nike shares tumbled 20% upon news that their IT technology supply chain project was in trouble. So, think about it, the stocks of Nike tumbled 20% upon news that one of their supply chain project was in trouble. As a result, Nike lost $100 million in orders because the system wasn't up and running. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Projects, failed projects, troubled projects can cause company to reach the peak or touch the bottom. Some characteristics of a troubled projects. So, couple of things that we have talked about. You always have troubled projects before seeing projects fail. Projects do not fail overnight. You always have the signs. And who is the organization and which is the team member that is most obviously going to see some of those troubled signs? The project manager and the executing team members, the direct stakeholders. The customer who is day in, day out responsible for seeing and observing the progress of the project. Why do we care about troubled projects? Half of the projects are not meeting the functionality or the original scope that was identified. Only 1/3 are considered successful, meeting the triple constraints of the project. So let's see characteristics of a troubled project. We as project managers are going to start seeing some signs, or we as project team members will start seeing some signs. And what would be those signs? No one has a firm idea of when the project will be finished, and most people have given up trying to guess. And who are these people? These are all your own team members who now at this point in time don't know when the project will finish. What is that deadline? And that misunderstanding of this deadline, or misunderstanding or complete ignorance of the fact, could be because of multiple reasons. The customer keeps going flip-flop between what the requirements are. There are issues, there are changes that keep getting introduced to the project. The project manager and the project team member are at the point when the accountability and responsibility has ceased to exist, because they don't know what they're responsible for producing and handing over to the customer. So sometimes the customer can be blamed, and multiple times the project team member itself, because of lack of experience or lack of dedication, commitment, or multiple other reasons. It could also be because of the own project organization, project manager and project team members issues. But ultimately, if you ask the team members and you ask the project manager, when is the project ending? What's the end date? What are the major milestones? And you see this look on their face that they don't know. First sign of seeing troubled project. The product itself is laden with defects. If you run a defect report at any point in time, the handshake between one phase to another is on shaky grounds also. The product that you're seeing already has a lot of defects. that the organization, the manager, the customer, they're all aware that that product that you're delivering to the customer or the end user is already laden with defects. You know that there are serious causes of concern that exist. Another main cause of troubled or failed project is when you start seeing the project team members working excessive hours, 20 or more hours per week of involuntary overtime, that the project team members start getting overworked. You know that the planning hasn't taken place, or things have creeped in that is causing the project team members to work excessive hours. There is no project that does not require team members to work more hours than required at any point in time, or during some portion of time during the life of the project. However, if it becomes a normal routine, when you're putting in more than the regular required 40 hours or 45 hours, whatever the planned working hour consensus was, you know that project is going on a troubled path. Another important signal where your antennas as a project manager should go up, or your customers or your sponsors' antennas should go up, that this is a troubled project, when management has lost its ability to control progress or even to ascertain the project status with any accuracy. So when you ask the project sponsor a simple question as, have you met certain milestone? Will these 3 deliverables be completed next Friday by 5 p.m.? And the answer is that look on their face that says, I don't know. I am not sure. You know that it is a troubled project. And the reason is inaccurate status reports, not being delivered at the committed interval of time. So it's Friday evening, by 5 p.m. you should have received the status report if you are the sponsor of the project or if you are the project customer. And it's already 6 o'clock and there's no status report. Monday you're supposed to meet, you get a call on Monday morning that the status meeting is being cancelled because of the late delivery of the status report. First signs of troubled project. That means the project manager and the project organization is not in control of the project. They keep hoping that they can buy more time to produce a status report that can actually satisfy and make happy the customers or the project organization itself maybe. At this point in time, the customer would have lost confidence that the project team will ever deliver the promised goals. Being on the shaky grounds of what to expect and what not to expect, the project customer start losing its confidence on the abilities and the capabilities of the project manager, the project team, and the project organization. And ultimately, at this point in time, they don't even know whether they will be able, and they being the project team, will be able to deliver the committed goals. And the goals could be a certain time, on a certain budget, and meeting the proposed functionality. Another sign that causes the antennas to go up about the project being very, very troubled is when the team becomes overly cautious and overly defensive about their progress. So how are you doing? Oh, we are doing fine. Why are you asking? In a planned project where everything is planned, there's no reason to be defensive. project management education talks about tangible data. You should always talk in terms of data. This is where we were. We were 52% complete last week. The plan was to get done to about maybe 55% this week. However, because of the unplanned holiday, we may not be able to meet its target. So, we may be a little late this week because of the unplanned holiday, but we'll be able to catch up next week, and we may have to introduce some overtime hours in trying to do this catch-up. At this point in time, as a project manager, you can also kind of assure the project customer that if the overtime hours can compensate the missed working or execution hours, then the deadline or the ultimate goal of the project should not be in danger at all. This is tangible data where you talk sense as a project manager. When you don't know what you're doing and there is no planned data or there's no tangible data to support your convictions or your conversation with the customer, then you are in trouble and your project is in trouble also. What starts happening when you are seeing all these signs of not knowing, not being certain, not being able to produce data, not being able to actually report status for your own team member or for the project customers? The relations between your project team members start getting strained. And you as a project manager start getting more involved in resolving conflicts between the human resources rather than focusing on the real work, which is the execution of the project as was planned in the planning phase. Project human resource management is an important aspect. Resolving conflicts need to be done on time, upfront, and should not cause projects to become troubled projects. And your time should not be spent as a project manager just resolving those conflicts, because human resource management also identifies that conflicts are very natural. They will happen. Conflicts between the project team members could be because of multiple reasons. We'll talk about that later. But that is not the sole work for you as a project manager. And when you start seeing too many of these conflicts between the project human resources, that is another big sign of your project becoming troubled or ultimately becoming a failed project. The project is on the verge of cancellation. You start getting those threatening signals, you start getting those threatening messages, you start getting those signals from the customer, from your project organization about the validity of your project. And then what starts happening? While all this chaos is going on, the morale of the project team has hit rock bottom. They are no longer operating in that optimistic, hyped up, I am going to deliver on time, on budget. Friday 5 p.m. I have to make sure this report goes out of the door because that is what was originally planned, and I don't want the planned versus the actual numbers to go down because of delivering of this particular report. All that optimism, all that hype up will ultimately start going down, and once the morale of the project team hits rock bottom, your project is going to have a hard time getting back on track. Because remember, the demand of the project is such that the project team members need to come in and hit the highway at 110 kilometers per hour. You just don't need 100% efficiency, there are points when you need 110 or 120% efficiency from each of the team members. And when that percentage starts going down to maybe 50% or 60% or 75%, the project is not going to meet its planned estimated targets. There are also situations when you see so many signs of confusion and issues, and now the customer is coming down to, I don't like you, I am not trusting you with my money, and now I am actually going to take legal action against you. This is not just a sign for a troubled project. You know that you are actually aiming towards a failed project if this situation ever happens. With all those signs and multiple more out there, what is happening now? Projects almost always become troubled towards the end of the project life cycle. So the crisis and project life cycle. In the initial phases, let's think about it. Everything is rosy, everything looks good, we are all working towards the same goal, the customer and the project organization and the project manager and the project team members are all happy fellows working towards successful implementation of the project objectives. More we start working towards the ultimate goal, moving from the planning phase, which is almost always on the drawing board. You still may be able to satisfy the customer, and then when you move on to the implementation and the monitoring and control, and you start seeing those variances. Again, what are those variances? The variances are between what was planned versus what is happening in the actual life. Planned versus the actual data. And you start seeing the crisis. You see the shadowed, the swollen up area on the presentation slide. That is when usually, most of the time, the crisis starts raising its ugly head. The crisis point occurs near the point at which the project should be close to full-scale implementation. So in the project life cycle, the area where there is maximum number of resources and maximum number of amount of cost that is being incurred, that is when you start seeing crisis. Obviously, this is the worst possible time for things to go awry. You, as a project manager, do not have the luxury of taking your time to do the requisite assessment and put a recovery plan into motion. You're so involved in tackling those issues or those signs that you don't have time to put in a full recovery plan into motion. Sponsors, clients, customers, and other stakeholders will demand immediate results, findings, and corrective actions. And the worst of it all, there will be increased management attention and scrutiny on all activities from this crisis point forward. Imagine yourself as a project manager in a situation where you're seeing troubles, you're seeing conflicts, some of those signs that we discussed in earlier slide, and you're trying to tackle those issues. And it's taking up a lot of your time and effort, and comes the attention and the focus of management from all areas. They also start needing your time, because by 9 p.m. they want you to tell them exactly what has happened during the day. So now, instead of trying to focus on identifying and taking care of issues for your project, you're also doing a daily reporting, or if not, an hourly reporting. So you're calling and SMSing people, you're calling and SMSing your customer management to give them the comfort level, so when they go to other meeting, they will be informed, project sponsors, all this time, all this useless time spent on things from management reporting perspective, rather than focusing all that time into resolving issues that can put your project on the right track. We will take a look at the previous slide and look at, there's a PDF that is that's going to accompany this particular presentation, and we will go into detail a little bit more than what we did right now. Let's look at some of those causes that I talked about, and then try to assess it and try to fix it. What can we do as project managers? We talked about those issues, but what can we do as project managers to actually take care of those issues, resolve those issues, so we can get ourselves and our project right on track to success rather than on track to failure. So, potential root causes of troubled project, and we're going to assess some of these. Failure to properly set and manage customers' expectation. Reach common understanding of project and product goal. Failure to establish accurate project estimates. Most of these issues, most of these root causes are happening in the planning phase of the project. If we as project manager and project organization, if we fail to plan for project risks, that is also going to put our project on the troubled or the failure path. Failure to engage independently or independent quality assurance reviews. If we fail to engage our sponsors appropriately. In the previous presentations, we talked about how important and how crucial it is to have adequate sponsor contribution for the success of our project. If we don't manage these sponsors appropriately, they are busy professionals and they will move on, and their attention will be towards other things rather than focusing on your project's objectives and goals. And we also talked about that safe distance that needs to be kept. So they're not in a situation where they're micromanaging, but they're also not in a situation where they totally forget about or their contributions are negligible in your project or towards your project in the initial phases, because that's the more important phases for project sponsors' contribution. In the initiation phase, when you are requiring all the data to come from the customer organization, and then towards the planning phase where you need to accurately define the data that will be matched and tracked. So if you lose their attention in the first two phases, then what are you planning? Your sponsors will start moving on to either micromanaging or demanding more information or demanding attention, or situations where you don't understand their demands. So if their demands had been given appropriate time in the planning phase, then at least you will be in a comfortable situation to claim that this is what you demanded within the planning phase, and this is what I'm providing to you. And that could be in terms of status, that could be in terms of communication, meetings, change control board, mitigation of risks, giving appropriate data, reports, and etc., etc. Potential root cause of troubled project. Number one, well, I cannot give a number to each one of them because each one of them have its own important role. But if you fail to acquire skilled resources for the project, can you imagine being on an IT project or any other project and you need skilled resources, because that is the estimate that you've provided to the customer was based on a resource coming in, doing the work and then leaving. And now you are unable to acquire that skilled resource. And somebody else comes in, fresh from college, without any expertise. He or she will need that additional time for training, will need to be mentored and brought up to speed. That's not always a bad thing, but it depends on what your initial estimates were. And it becomes harder when you bring in somebody who's not either dedicated or committed to the timely execution of your work. That acquiring of skilled resource, that failure to acquire the skilled resource actually puts your project on path of being troubled. Another potential root cause of troubled project is failure to establish control of the project in the initial phase of kickoff. A project manager has one opportunity in the initial phase, which is the kickoff meeting, to grab and control your project, to provide that comfort level to the sponsors that I know what I'm doing and I'm in control. I will follow these situations, I will follow these templates, and your project is in safe hands. If you miss that opportunity of providing comfort level to the customer, you miss the opportunity of being in a situation where you're in control of the project. Hence, micromanagement, hence intervention, all of that start. Or worst, cancellation of the project or changing of the project manager itself. One of the many potential root causes is also the failure to understand project organization and roles. One thing that has caused a lot of projects to be troubled and failed is in the initial phases, you are introduced to the wrong people or to the wrong roles and responsibilities, and you are communicating and you're getting feedback from them, and all of a sudden some new personality is brought into the picture, and hence the start of trouble. You as a project manager in the initial phase need to understand and grab hold of the organization roles and responsibility, get some feedback from the peers, go out during the interviews, try to assess if you have been introduced to the right people for the information. Are they in a situation where they can dictate your project's goals within their own project organization? When there are trouble, are these people capable and competent enough to resolve those issues for you? Is the sponsor committed enough? Does the sponsor have the right role in the organization? Can he or she be passed by others in the organization while making some very crucial decisions for your project later in the game? That's a very important role of a project manager or a business analyst in the initiation phases. So, if you fail to understand the customer's project organization and roles, then ultimately your project is going to suffer. Some other potential root causes of troubled projects will be failure to establish project management procedures. In the initial kickoff, if you fail to establish project management procedures and you fail to communicate a plan and get commitment between the different roles and different organizations or meeting those commitments, then again cause for issues. If you fail to conduct project management reviews, so status meetings, CCB meetings, change meetings, which is the CCB meeting, and other reviews. Remember, there are several reviews. Moving from one phase to another is also a review, a sign-off, and multiple others. If you fail to conduct those project management reviews, then again you're on the path to failure. Another root cause could be failure to implement change control process and the CCB commitment, the change control board commitment. I talked about the roles and responsibilities, and I talked about the members of the change control board in some of the earlier presentations. If you don't have a committed change control board who have the vision and the sense of what should be implemented and what should not be implemented as far as changes to the initial scope is concerned, then that's again signal for issue. Potential root causes of troubled project is failure to complete preceding phase formally and starting off a new project phase. All of us as project managers have been in situations where we're kind of nudged and pushed and shoved from moving from one phase to the next phase of the project, and most often from moving from the planning phase to the execution phase. Without a formal sign-off, without a formal understanding, without a formal commitment from the project sponsors, project manager and project organization should never move from one phase to another phase of the project. And if you are put into that situation, then your responsibility as a project manager is to raise that not as a risk but as a serious issue, hopefully of a medium or a high concern. So it is put up front and documented clearly in accurate and better documents. Better documents being the issues management document, put up front in the status report, so all understand that you have been nudged into moving from one phase to another without a formal approval. And there are situations that should have been committed for, have been ignored. Again, last but not the least, is the failure to retain key project employees. If you're not in a recession mode and you're into an industry where the turnover is fairly significant and you keep losing employees and you're not successful in retaining some of those employees that are very, very crucial to your project success, that is also a root cause for a troubled project. So many root causes, and there are multiple more. Some are very, very unique to your projects. Some are very unique to the industry that you're conducting your projects. Some are lessons learned that move from one project to another, and we keep making the same mistakes. Whatever the reason is, let's try to take one of these or some of these root causes and drill deep into what could we have done as project team and project managers to resolve some of these issues in the earlier phases. So we can actually pull our projects from being troubled and put them into the path of success. We're going to take a look at some of these root causes, and drill deep into it. So let's look at the root cause of failure to properly set and manage customers' expectation. What could I as a project manager do in this situation? An easy one is to try to under-promise and over-deliver. So under-promise and over-deliver. Do not tell the customers, do not promise the customer to bring the stars and the moons. Always try to have data, accurate data, of what the customer should be expected. Surprise customer is not a happy customer. Keep the customer going with you at all times. Provide accurate and timely status reports in all situations, whether it's bad news or it's good news. Inform the customer of any bad news as early as possible while demonstrating commitment to resolve the issue. So it's not just giving bad news to the customer over and over again, but try to share the bad news with the situation of this is what my plan is to recover from the situation. And from week to week, you should stand on that promise of providing the customer of accurate information and show signs of recovery. Establish formal standing meeting. Again, communication management plan. Set up a meeting time to meet and review the status with the customer. And your status should not just be what is happening, but signs of recovery, of these are the issues, these are the risks, and your plans of how to recover from these situations. Share test plans, test data, and quality assurance review. Give the customer that comfort level that you are in control and you have situations out there in your work breakdown structure which are going to have that critical eye and which will be able to make sure that you are on right track and you have built those measures within your work breakdown structure. Encourage your customers' participation in change control meetings and approval of beneficial changes only. And this is where the committed change control board reviewers come into place, where they need to have the vision, they need to understand the vision and the mission of their organization and this particular project to understand that yes, this change is beneficial, and some of these multiple changes that are coming in that may affect delaying of my project don't need to be implemented. So the participants of the change control board meeting is very important. Have the customer prioritize issues and changes. This will give them an insight into any possible delays in project schedule down the road. Have your customers prioritize issues and changes. It's not just you, let them have a say in it. So when things go on the rocky road, they will share the pain with you and they will be informed customers. Share project or product status tactfully but truthfully. It's not always, you should never have a reputation of a project manager with always bad news. You should have the reputation of a project manager that is truthful but knows how to handle these project issues. That is the best compliment to any project manager. Failure to establish accurate project estimates, another one of those root causes. Let's drill down and come up with situations of how to come up with this situation. Try to get project team members' commitments to their assigned task estimates. This is where the accountability aspect comes in. So when we say that this particular task will take 5 days, the person who has been given the responsibility of completing this task within 5 days need to be in a situation where he or she feels committed in delivering it. So on the 4th day, if he or she realizes that it's hard to meet that goal or objective, by 5 p.m. tomorrow, that person will be in the office working the night out to ensure the delivery of the task or the deliverable on schedule. It's the team members' ownership and accountability that should be established. And how do you do that as a project manager? At every point in time during the project life cycle, your project priorities and the deadlines and the commitments need to be clearly communicated, not just with the project organization and the sponsors, but with your project team members also. Make sure they understand the repercussions of when these targets are not met. If you have set realistic expectations and the accountability piece exists, it's not very hard to convince employees to put in that extra effort to reach and meet those targets. Utilize experienced project personnel to develop or validate estimates. Again, what are some of those causes of failed projects? Inaccurate estimates. So when the team member that has been assigned to deliver the project activities or certain activities, if they feel committed to delivering it on time, then you wouldn't have any problem. So you should always have realistic estimates, and you should always put the people who are responsible for doing it accountable for meeting those targets. Make adjustments for unknown risks. There is not a situation, we being in troubled areas, if I should call it, where some of these unplanned for holidays always come into existence. There are security concerns, but everywhere in the world there are some kind of incidents, some natural calamity, some unplanned for holiday, something that kind of pulls you back. Make sure you have adjustments for those unknown risks. Training, that's not an unknown risk, so you should always have that buffer in your estimates. Administrative tasks, remember everything takes time. Your writing of the status report takes time. Your assistant making the telephone calls to confirm a meeting takes time. Quality assurance reviewer coming to your place take time. It's not just the meeting time, but if they're driving from some place to reach this meeting venue, that takes time. You as a project manager need to put in those timings as part of your estimates. And also corrective measures. Plan on your test or certain number of tests failing, and then coming up with corrective measures to actually take care of that situation. Make sure you have time built in for those situations. Plan for technical reviews at several appropriate project stages with consultants or experienced staff to revalidate your estimates. This is a time when your SMEs will give their input. It will be validated by the people who will be responsible for doing the work, along with your input, your customers' input. So, making sure that whatever the target date or the time is everybody is feeling committed towards delivery of that time frame. If there are concerns with meeting the final project delivery date, then another iteration of validation of those estimates should take place. Another important one, failure to acquire skilled resources for your project. Try to start the project staff acquiring process as soon as possible. Remember the bell curve that we talked about? In the planning phase, we need to start working on, before the slope starts going upwards, we need to start acquiring resources. Sometimes sooner the better. You may not have the right cost estimates at that point in time. You may not have the money to invest in putting those resources, but in typical projectized environment, there are buffers put in, the cost buffers that are put in place to make sure if the skilled resource is available, they are brought in towards the initial or the early phases of the implementation phase. Formally commit project resources prior to committing implementation date with the customer. So make sure that you have the resources ready to start work with you or your organization prior to committing to a status end date with the customer. And you are only saving yourself from the issue of, yes, I committed to a certain date a delivery date, but I have been unable, or my organization has been unable to acquire the skilled resources. That is always a no-no in any status meeting. So avoid that situation. Ensure that human resource management is ready to meet the needs of key high-skilled resources. What is this? For experienced professionals who are listening to me right now, 95% of organizations are functional organizations. So you are actually not going out to acquire those skilled resources. You are following the process of beg, borrow, steal from other organizations for your own project. So make sure that the human resource department is ready for that transition of giving you the right skill set at the right time, whatever that committed right time is. Provide training and mentoring opportunities. Clearly define project's goal and objectives and how it will contribute in meeting the team members' future aspirations. It's that one-on-one. Every person that you will acquire on your project team, along with yourself, has aspirations and goals. Everyone has a vision of where they want to be in the next 2 years, in the next 5 years, and you as a project manager need to provide them that opportunity within your project to reach that goal. So clearly define project's goal and objectives and how it will contribute in meeting the team members' future aspirations. If I want to be a skilled Java developer in next 6 months, you need to make sure that appropriate tasks are identified and provided to this particular team member, so he or she feels that urge and need to put in that extra time and that extra effort to accomplish your project's objectives, and similarly they will be feeding into their ultimate goal of being a skilled Java resource. Failure to implement change control process and change control board meeting commitment. Always document changes. All changes are worthy enough to be documented. Remember, there is no project in the world where there are no changes. If you have a change document with no changes, you have missed something, and you have missed a lot of important changes in your project. In any given day there will be changes, and all those changes are worthy enough to have a place in the change log. Establish strict adherence to formal documented change control process. You should be in a situation where you have established, as a project manager in a project organization, a strict adherence to formal documented change control process. So, using something as an example, all changes need to be documented in the change log. When changes affect, or if the changes are significant enough, that means that they, if implemented, will change the end date, cost baseline, or will change the initial scope of the project, then that change needs to go in a change review form. The change review form will have the appropriate places to highlight and provide more details. This change should ultimately be moved on to the change control board meeting, where all issues like money, is it beneficial, should it be implemented, kind of discussions take place between the change control board reviewers. If approved, that is the only time that particular change should be implemented. So this process adherence is important, and if you tend to ignore this, then again this can become the most significant issue of causing your project to become a troubled or a failed project. Everything that I've described so far also needs to be identified, and the customer needs to be acquainted initially to this change management process by reviewing changes with no schedule or cost impact. As a project manager, you should encourage the customer to put aside funds, at least 5 to 10%. And again, this is statistical data depending on how many changes should be expected in any project life cycle. So, assuming that 5 to 10% cost is actually set aside for approved changes and counted later in the project life cycle. In the initial phases, you still have that tendency and you still have that leverage to implement some of those changes in the project life cycle. But later on, every change is going to become more costly, not just from money perspective, but also from resources availability perspective. There should be mandatory participation for all change control board meeting members to review and approve changes affecting project's triple constraints. Another thing that I'll talk about in the later slides also is that if you look at the group of change control board reviewers, they will not be able to participate in your change control board meeting because some of the project sponsors will have other activities, and that's just being real life. A communication management plan should always have a flexibility built in when if they are not able to participate in the meeting physically, then electronically the change document is sent to them and they can approve or disapprove that change or many changes electronically. So this gives them a situation or flexibility of having a say in the change control board meeting of whether the change is beneficial or not. So a change is sent to them electronically. 3 days later they will approve or reject the change. That is fine. You wait for it. If it is in approved status, everybody is in agreement. You implement the change. If there is a disapproval or disagreement, then you set up another meeting or ignore that change and proceed further. Preventing root causes of troubled project. Another issue that we talked about, and I spent a lot of time talking about this one, is the failure to complete the preceding phase formally and starting of new project phase, especially the planning phase. So every project manager gets that nudge and shove from moving from the initiation to the planning phase, and especially from the planning phase to the execution phase or the monitoring and the control phase. Some ideas of what to do is never start execution until completing the planning phase. Well, there is no word as never in a project manager's directory. If you are in a situation as a project manager where you're kind of shoved or pressed for moving from one phase to another, you should highlight that as a risk or as an issue and put that as a high or a medium risk or an issue. Make sure that continuously comes in a status report so the customer is looking at it and understanding that there may be repercussions because of moving too quickly from one phase to another. So never start execution until completing the planning phase. If you are put in that situation, make sure it's documented and highlighted and given appropriate attention in all your status reports. The golden quote for project management is, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Again, the word never start a phase or a task until the dependent predecessors' tasks have been successfully tested and completed. If you don't want to use the word never, because you could be in a situation as a real life project manager or a project coordinator, and if you're made to do that, then document it, highlight it, and give it appropriate importance in status reports that are provided to the customer. Another root cause that we talked about was the failure to produce and commit to a quality proposal. This is the initiation phase issues that could cause you headaches and heartaches later in the life of the project, and later being the planning or the execution phase. Avoid committing to a poorly written proposal by non-technical and seldom unskilled marketing and sales personnel. Think of being in the initiation phase. Your services may or may not have been acquired as a project manager. There are marketing representatives who are out there promising stars and the moons to the customer, agreeing to the demands, sometimes unreasonable demands of the customer, and signing up on that. That means the project charter has been signed between the project customer and your organization without the presence of technical resources or without the presence of a project manager or subsequent project team members. If whenever you are brought in as a project manager, do not try to commit to the schedule or the cost commitment that is in the charter. If you see a risk of that causing delays later on, this would be a good time to review the project charter. Informed customer will be a happy customer if you are able to highlight those issues up front with them and your project organization. Remember, ultimate delivery of the project is your responsibility, and you are going to be accountable for that delivery, and the project organization will put the blame on you when those dates are not met. Feel that commitment, feel that accountability, and revisit the charter and revisit those initial commitments. Decline to bid if there is inadequate preparation time for the proposal. Again, feel that responsibility on your shoulders. You will be responsible for delivery on time, on budget, on schedule. If needed at this point in time, hire independent consultants to validate the feasibility and to avoid misrepresentation of facts and figures. This would be a good time to bring in consultants, subject matter experts within or outside of your project organization, and also getting hands on the right project customer and the project sponsor to validate those numbers. Follow legal terminology and avoid nomenclature that is vague and intangible. Avoid adjectives. Will give you world-class response time. There is no world-class response time. Provide quality product. There is no, how do you define quality product? Avoid using adjectives, and we will talk a little bit more about that nomenclature. Very many should be avoided. Wi-Fi response time will be 5 minutes, that is acceptable, within a range of 300 feet, that is acceptable, right? Move away from adjectives and get into the world, say welcome to the world of numbers and data. Clearly state what is in scope and what is out of scope. Be very, very clear in what is that you consider being in scope and what is out of scope. The assumptions and the constraints of the project should be identified in the project charter. Obtain agreement on scope before pricing the effort. So your customer and you need to focus on the scope and be very comfortable with the end result or the end product of the product or service that will be delivered as part of your project. Always review the proposal with legal, finance, and quality assurance departments. These are the departments who have people in there or resources in there who have seen many proposals, and always have that expertise or comments that can actually save you as a project manager from a lot of heartaches and headaches later on. So these are few things that you can use to save yourself from some of these highlighted issues that can cause a project to be troubled or failed. Last but not the least, let's look at few things that could prevent your troubled projects from becoming failed projects. At the first signs of trouble, define the problem and a solution and alert the stakeholders. Alerting the stakeholders means project organization, sponsors, project customer. Hold the hands of your project customer through the journey throughout the journey of project life cycle. Informed customer is a happy customer. You need to give them data, you need to share with them your issues, and also at the same time give them the comfort level that you are in control as a project manager and will be able to take care of these issues. Involve all stakeholders. And then I went on to say that politics is a key. When I use the word politics, I don't mean it to be in a negative way or in a slimy way. Politics meaning knowing your key stakeholders, sharing the information with them truthfully but tactfully. You need to have that aspect in you as a project manager to ensure involvement, but your project priorities should be very clear in your head. Sometimes a little extra effort in inspection, analysis, and planning can make the difference between a failed project and a successful one. That extra effort sometimes becomes very hard in the initial phases of the project because you're so involved in taking care of multiple things. But always remember that if you don't spend that extra time now, in the later phases, these will become major problems and will take up many more hours of your time. So, using that extra time now on the drawing board in the planning phase will save you from a lot of missed or a lot of sleepless nights at the end of the project or towards the end of the project. The last bullet is a very important bullet. Continuous and sustained monitoring and control is necessary and mandatory. Monitoring of your project resources, monitoring of the documentation, monitoring and keeping that relationship with the project organization sponsor and the customer sponsors, monitoring of your project resources, your deliverables, the estimating process, working with the consultants, bringing in the right subject matter expert. All that takes work, all that requires time, and it is important for delivery of a successful project. Do not relax. One thing that you need to remember as a project manager is if you don't want to be in that statistical data of the majority of projects being in a failed or a troubled state, then you need to work continuously, never relaxing. Successful project manager is very dedicated and very committed and puts in a lot of effort and puts in a lot of time in making their project successful. It's not an easy job, but again, it's not a job that is not achievable. Successful project management needs planning, needs dedication, need to ensure accountability, not just from themselves, but also from their team members. It also needs effort in keeping your customer informed. It also needs commitment from your project sponsor of being there when you need them, and so many other tasks. However, it is always achievable. I wish you all good luck, and I wish you all the best in this journey of successful projects. There are troubled projects, there are failed projects, but being educated project management professional gives you that comfort level that you can bring and you can learn from other people's mistake and bring your project and keep your project on the track of success. Good luck, and I will see you inshallah for the next lecture. Best wishes, happy learning. There is a website, there's a PDF that has been provided to you along with this presentation. Take some time out to review that. It is very informative, and it actually gives you some of the processes, some of the efforts, some of the tasks of dealing with troubled projects and taking your projects from being in a crisis mode and pulling it right back onto the track of success. There are consultants, there are organizations that are out there to help you in this situation. So it's a good document from that perspective into understanding what those consultants are doing to bring the project right back on track when they see early signs of issues and disasters, or even when they see issues and disastrous situations towards the implementation phases of it. This is Ghazala Amin, and I will see you in the next lecture. Goodbye. Allah Hafiz.